What's up guys, Taylor here for Beacon of Light, and I am trying a new format today. I've got my green screen, my logo behind me. In today's video, we're going to talk about Justin Trudeau and his communist army and how they're looking to implement stricter laws on freedom of speech, looking to potentially jail people for saying certain things. As you can see here, Breitbart is reporting that Justin Trudeau's Canada proposed law may allow life imprisonment for online speech crimes. A proposed law in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Canada will reportedly allow judges to throw adults in jail for life if they advocate for genocide online. Now here's the deal. I don't like genocide. I don't want genocide, but I think people should be able to advocate for it against my advice. But if people want to say stupid shit and take the side of genocidal maniacs, as long as they're not actually committing the genocide or committing a call to action, for example, yelling fire in a crowded theater when there isn't a fire, they should be able to do it. And it's society, people like you and me, that need to convince them that they're idiots and they should step down from that position and change their lives. But it's not the job of the government to step in and lock them up for saying stupid shit. Fox News reported on Thursday that the Online Harms Act, Bill C-63, and if you follow Jordan Peterson at all, you know how any bill that starts with a C up there in Canada doesn't seem to be good, would permit life sentences. The law would also allow a provincial judge to impose house arrest and a fine if there were reasonable grounds to believe a defendant will commit an offense. Now they think that they're the precogs from Minority Report. Pre-crime enforcers. After Justice Minister Arif Virana, of course it's a name like that now is their justice minister, he said that in his role as a father he was frightened of the dangers children might encounter online. Virana also said there were laws regulating the safety of toys but not screens. Social media users quickly shared their thoughts on the Fox report, one person writing, "Rest in peace, free speech." This is the thing. I don't like genocide, like I said. People are morons, some of them, that are out there advocating for this nonsense. Some of them trolling, some of them mean it. They're pieces of shit. The problem is, the government should not be the one stepping in and saying you can't say that unless it's a direct call to action. Why, you may ask? They take more and more power little by little and inch by inch. And something Jordan Peterson was very profound in saying, especially after his debacle up there in Canada, where he refused to address people by their preferred pronouns in opposition specifically to Bill C-16, I think it was called up there in Canada, mandating that you refer to people by their certain pronouns. Jordan Peterson, by the way, has expressed no problem with addressing people who treat him with respect by their preferred pronouns as long as it's not absurd. He pointed out that imagine someone tells you to step back 1 foot, and every other day, without you noticing, you take another step back and another step back. Well, in some years, you're now back a mile from where you started, or miles and miles, whatever analogy you want to use. They take control little by little, inch by inch, until now all of a sudden you're standing further back than you could have ever imagined, and they have all the control. Bill C-63 will create stronger protections for kids online and better safeguard everyone in Canada from online hate. That's not the job of the government. That's the job of parents. That's the job of friends and family. People should educate people about the dangers and the risks that are online and out there in the public. It is not the government's job to step in and protect people from online activities. The proposed Online Harms Act would specifically target 7 types of harmful content. Content that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor. Any pedophiles out there should be castrated, hung, tossed off the side of a cliff, eviscerated, and launched into space. Who is going to define sexually victimizing a child? Hopefully it's cut and dry. The problem is these governments can use these specific examples to shoehorn in eliminating political dissidents, to shoehorn in curbing and curtailing other types of speech online. It's as simple as that. You give them an inch and they take a mile. Intimate content communicated without consent, content used to bully a child, content that allows a child to harm themselves, content that induces a child to harm themselves, content that foments hatred. There it is. What is considered hatred? Why should we lock people up for hating something? I hate Brussels sprouts. You gonna lock me up? Minister of Brussels? Who determines these things? That's the question. And by the way, Trudeau is obviously Fidel Castro's son. Obviously. Content that incites violence. Now, we've seen a little bit of this here in the United States already. We've seen actually more than I would have liked to admit. Donald Trump was thought to have incited violence on January 5th or 6th or whenever he actually said words that the media and the left is tying to the acts committed on January 6th. Even though in the very same speech, Donald Trump said, peacefully assemble. Peacefully. If the lefties in politics in this country had their way, that would be grounds to lock someone up. And you already see all the charges that they're throwing at Donald Trump, all these ridiculous cases, the political theater trying to lock him up. Content that incites violent extremism or terrorism. That could be anything. Who makes the decisions? Who defines these things? It's too loose. I don't want the government having this power over us because they could turn around tomorrow, and they already have in many instances, and say, if you have the wrong political opinion, you're inciting violence, extremism, and terrorism. They've already done it. Joe Biden's out there talking about how the biggest threat to democracy in this country is white supremacy. Nonsense. What is the evidence of that? A handful of KKK members in Alabama? Nonsense. A recent survey found that less than half of Canadians think the plan to regulate social media will result in a safer atmosphere online. During this poll, half of the pollees said they are wary of the government's ability to protect free speech, and a majority said they support the controversial proposal to introduce stiffer sentences for hate speech crimes. A lot of brainwashing, a lot of ignorance, a lot of people that don't understand why freedom of speech is so important. Now again, we have some restrictions on freedom of speech. You can't directly call to violence. Now why is freedom of speech so important, you may ask? Freedom of speech is, first of all, it's the First Amendment in the Constitution of the United States of America. It is integral to a functioning democracy, to a democratic republic like we live in. It's foundational. If you can't criticize the government openly, if you can't advocate for certain change of policy and just change in general and explore different ideas, you have a very dull democracy, if that. You're closer to a socialist state, you're closer to a totalitarian state, you're closer to a communist state where the government controls what you say. It also allows for the flowing of ideas that are conducive to innovation and progress. Some of the technologies that we have today and the civics that we have today are due to the ability of your average citizen like you and me to be able to explore new ideas, even if they pulled at the strings of society, the fabric of society, even if it pulled at the strings of what was popular at the time. Whatever it may be, it could be offensive. And that's another key issue, is that who decides what's offensive and to whom? You have to be able to propose new ideas without fear. It's also key to personal development and the autonomy over oneself. You have to be able to express your beliefs and your ideas. And these conversations and ideas and explorations can lead to some of the most meaningful conversations you'll ever have, the most meaningful events you'll ever have, the most meaningful moments you'll ever have. Exploring these things, revealing, revelation. We also have to be able to hold governments and institutions accountable. We have to have transparency. We have to allow people like me and you, journalists, citizens, to speak out against governments and other institutions in order to create a level of transparency. We need to be able to talk about corruption, injustice, overarching power, and do it without facing consequences from the government. Not only that, but if I can't have a civil disagreement or argument with someone whom I disagree with and come to some sort of conclusion, whether we just agree to disagree or the person who's correct in the instance proves that to the other person and then we agree completely afterwards, Well, what freaking use? What good is that? Only war happens after that, and violence, and physical violence. That's why we use our words, so we don't have to use physical violence. It helps resolve conflicts. And then obviously, for the same reason we have the Electoral College, to not allow minority views, whatever they are, to get stuffed and silenced. People's voices have to be heard no matter if their opinion is dumb as hell or not. Because in the Socratic method, where people have discussions involving criticalities, it is there that we can dispel, disprove, and shut down bad ideas. It's not the government's job. Last but not least, it can just make it harder for that totalitarianism that I spoke of, that authoritarianism to take root with transparency, because people can organize and fight back against evil, essentially, whether it be through words and protests and holding people accountable and pushing politicians to change to the will of the people. It's quite helpful. Now, freedom of speech does have its limits. I get that. However, one thing that's been talked about a lot recently, and it's in this article, they talk about it in Canada seemingly every day. The U.K., people have already been arrested and thrown in jail for violations of speech laws, essentially. In Holland, there was some comedian that made some silly video mocking the prime minister or something like that, and cops visited his house to try and intimidate him from doing that again. In Scotland, some guy had his pug dog raise his paw or something like that, and they considered that to be too similar to a Sieg Heil from Hitler or something like that, so they arrested this guy. It's happening, and historically the places those happen the most are these authoritarian and totalitarian states. When they can define what hate speech is, we are lost, because then hate speech can be whatever they want it to be. If they're just trying to silence political dissidents, or if they just simply don't like what you said, if it doesn't fit their narrative and their agenda, they can then choose to deem that as hate speech. It's definitely a balancing act. But at the end of the day, I am staunchly for people being able to say what they want. If it's not defamatory, there's some legal ambiguity in defamation lawsuits as well. As long as it's not a direct call to action, I think it's up to us, not the government, who thinks we're all idiots that need their help, or at least that's what they say, so that they can gain power. They can stay out of it. We can figure it out. Anyway, guys, if you like this new format, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button down below. I'll just point down there, and come on back. Hope you guys are doing well. Have a good day.